A hardened ex-lawman lives alone on a remote mountain, haunted by loss and silence. When a fugitive mother and her 2 children arrive at his doorstep, everything he buried begins to surface. Bound by survival and shadowed by suspicion, their fragile bond teeters between trust and truth. Can a woman on the run find safety in the heart of the very man sworn to judge her? Well now, pull your chair near the fire and let the wind rattle someone else's windows for a while. This story takes us back to the winter of 1879 in the high reaches above a town called Elkhorn Ridge. Just a dot on the map where dust met sky and folks minded their past like it might come knocking. Before the blizzard, before the knock on that lonely cabin door. Back when a man named Jude Lawson tried to forget the badge he wore, and a woman named Eliza Hart carried more truth than she dared speak. It all started one quiet morning before fate howled in. Sometimes the family you choose is the one fate blows in with the storm. It don't come polite neither. Don't knock, don't ask, just comes howling out the hills, cold as judgment and twice as mean, dragging sorrow behind it like a busted saddlebag. A man can spend years out here, hiding behind silence, thinking it'll forgive him what time won't. But the land don't forget. Not the bones buried beneath it, not the names whispered in sleep. Out here, everything echoes. Footsteps, mistakes, prayers, no one answers. He thought he'd found peace. Turns out, it was just quiet, loud enough to remember every damned thing. They say a storm will pass. That ain't always true. Some storms settle in a man's chest, low and heavy, and never move on. You don't ride them out, you carry 'em, long as your legs'll hold you. Funny thing is, sometimes, right when you're sure you'll die alone out here, wind biting your back, ghosts chewing your soul, fate sends you something else, something that cries, that bleeds, that needs. That's how you know the storm's changing, not easing, just giving you a reason to stand through it. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Snow sat deep on the roof. Wind moved through the trees like a whisper that didn't care if it was heard. Out there, on that godless ridge of land, the world was white and dead quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brought peace, the kind that let old thoughts crawl out from where you'd buried them. He stepped outside the cabin slow, breath curling in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Leather boots creaked in the frost. His coat hung heavy on a frame worn down from too many winters and too little talk. The axe handle fit into his hand like it belonged there. Same as always. Some things don't change, even when a man does. The log pile was half gone. He set to work without hurry. Wood cracked, fell, again. The rhythm didn't warm him, but it gave the ache in his shoulder something to do. A crow watched from the branch of a dead pine, didn't call out, just sat there, black against the pale. Inside, the cabin was clean but cold, not for lack of fire, but for lack of anything soft. One chair, one table, one cup, and a rifle hanging above the door, loaded. He set the wood by the hearth and stirred the coals back to life. Fire popped. The dog, half blind, more scar than skin, lifted its head from the rug and blinked at him. Didn't wag, just watched, like it was waiting to see if this was the day something changed. There was a drawer he didn't open most days. Today he did. A bundle of letters sat inside, edges curled, names rubbed down by time and fingers that couldn't let go. He ran a thumb over the top one, didn't read it, just put it back and closed the drawer slow. Near the back wall, a wooden box held a tin star with a name scratched out, buried under a folded baby blanket and a blood-stained handkerchief. He didn't touch those. Out beyond the window, past the trees and the edge of the ridge, was a rise in the ground, shaped like it held something. Snow covered it, but he knew the shape by heart. A marker stood at the head, no name, just a line of carved hash marks, like a man was trying to count what he'd lost. He lit a lantern as dusk fell. The silence pressed in again. Not peaceful, just empty. He sat in the chair, let the fire warm one side of his face, and said nothing at all. The storm came sudden, like a drunk with a grudge. He'd seen the sky turn mean before, clouds bruising up over the mountain, wind sharpening like a blade, but this one rolled in wrong. Fast. Wild. Snow hit sideways, thick and blind. The kind of cold that gets under your skin and into your bones, even with the fire roaring. By nightfall, he'd braced the door, checked the windows, banked the fire, sat with a rifle across his lap, not for intruders, but for wolves maybe, or memories. Then, through the wind, he heard it. Not wind, not trees. A knock? No. A thump. Then another, like something heavy hitting the porch. Then nothing. He waited. Maybe it was drift. Maybe a branch. Maybe the mountain just trying to trick a lonely man into stepping outside. But then, a cry. Thin, raw, a child's. He moved slow, rifle first, opened the door against the push of wind, snow blasting in like it wanted the room more than he did. Lantern light reached maybe a foot into the dark. Then he saw it, figures in the snow, one big, hunched shape barely standing, two smaller ones clinging to it. The woman fell as he stepped out, hard. Her coat was torn at the shoulder, soaked stiff. Her hands were bare. One child cried out, a girl maybe 7, dragging at the woman's coat. The boy, little, stood like he didn't know if he was alive or not. He hesitated. A man don't get to choose many things in this life, but in that moment he could have walked back inside, shut the door, said it wasn't his burden. Instead, he slung the rifle over his back and picked up the boy, skin like ice, weight like nothing. He reached for the girl's hand, pulled her in. The woman, she tried to speak, failed. Her eyes locked with his. No pleading, just a look that said, whatever happens, let it be fast. He dragged her in last, kicking the door shut behind them. Inside, the fire hissed at the cold. No words were spoken, just the wet slap of snow on the floorboards. The girl stood shivering, eyes locked on the flames. The boy curled into a ball where he was laid. The woman didn't move. He grabbed blankets, peeled off wet clothes, set water to boil. Still no one spoke. He didn't ask who they were. Not yet. Didn't matter. All that mattered was they weren't dead. Not yet. The fire cracked steady, orange light dancing up the log walls, licking shadows across the low ceiling. The cabin smelled of smoke, wet wool, and fear gone quiet. Outside the storm still howled, but in here it was the kind that holds its breath. The boy slept first, curled on a pile of furs, limbs twitching like a pup in dream. His cheeks, raw red from windburn, began to pink with heat. The girl sat on the hearth, feet bare, blanket around her shoulders. Steam rose from her wet braids. She didn't cry, just stared into the flames like she was waiting for the fire to speak. The woman hadn't said much, just a nod when he'd pointed where she should lay. He'd given her coffee, black, bitter, hot, and she took it with hands that barely held steady. Her face was all hollows, the lines around her mouth cut deep. She watched everything, not with suspicion, with a kind of held-back panic, like if she blinked, she might miss the next danger. He didn't ask questions, not that night. There was stew in the pot, venison and root vegetables boiled down thick. He ladled it out without a word. The girl took hers with both hands and ate fast, like she thought someone might take it back. The woman didn't touch her bowl right away. She sat, still as frost, eyes tracking the man like he might be just another kind of storm. He didn't smile, didn't frown neither, just ate, slow, his knife scraping the bowl clean. Later, he set up a cot in the far corner. Thin mattress, old quilt, a pillow that still smelled faintly of cedar. The woman lay there, boots still on, her back to the room. Her shoulders trembled once, then went still. The girl whispered her name into the fire. Clara. Then pointed to the boy. Tommy. Her voice was high, cracked, like wind through dry leaves. Then she stared at the man. You got a name? She asked. He paused, chewing a strip of jerky. No need, he said. She looked at him a long while, then nodded like that made sense. The fire settled low, shadows stretched longer. No one asked where they came from, no one asked why. The woman didn't sleep much. He knew that without looking. She breathed too light. Sometime near dawn, Clara rose from her furs and padded over to the man's chair. She stood close, too close for a stranger, but didn't touch him. "You live here all alone?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Ain't much call for company." She nodded, eyes shiny in the firelight. "We don't got nobody neither. Mama says we ain't running. We're just moving fast." He didn't answer. She stood there a moment longer, then went back to her bedroll beside her brother, pulled the blanket over both of them. The woman hadn't moved. He sat there a long time, just watching the fire eat wood, thinking how sometimes silence tells the most about a person. Not the words they won't say, but the ones they're carrying too deep to speak. Morning light didn't change much in the mountains. It came slow, blue and heavy, filtering through pine needles and frost-crusted glass, just enough to show what hadn't changed overnight. The storm had eased but not ended. Snow hung from the trees like old regrets. Inside the cabin, breath still showed in the air before the fire caught again. He was already up, boots on, splitting wood by the side wall where the drift hadn't swallowed the pile. The girl, Clara, watched him from the window with that same quiet stare. The boy, Tommy, clung to a piece of bread like it might vanish if he blinked. The woman sat at the table, one hand around a cup, the other tucked in her lap, fingers twitching like she was winding invisible thread. They didn't talk much, any of them. Words came slow in that cabin, earned, not wasted. By the third day, the man started leaving extra logs inside before he went out. Set a small knife near the hearth where the kids could reach it, wrapped in cloth. Small things. Nothing said out loud. That evening, Clara handed him a piece of paper. Said it was just a picture. Crude lines drawn in coal. 2 stick children, 1 tall man with a hat, all standing near a crooked house. A little X in the sky for a bird. He looked at it a long while, then tucked it behind the mantel clock with "Hout comment." She smiled anyway. The woman finally gave her name on the 4th night. Just Eliza. Said it like it didn't belong to her anymore. He nodded once, didn't offer his in return. Over supper, the girl asked if he ever had kids. He didn't answer at first, just stared into the stew like it had something buried in it. Then he said, "Had a boy once." Tommy looked up, mouth full. "Where is he?" The man's jaw worked once, then settled. "Gone." Clara blinked slow. "How?" He didn't look at her. "Fire." Eliza's spoon paused mid-air. Her eyes dropped to her lap. Later that night she found him outside stacking wood again, even though the pile hadn't moved. "I'm sorry," she said. He didn't look up. "Ain't your sorrow to carry. You still carry it." He split a log clean, the echo cracking through the cold like a rifle report. "I was supposed to be there," he said after a while. "Rode out to help a neighbor find a lost calf. Storm came in fast. By the time I got back..." Eliza said nothing. He laid the axe down slow, rested his hands on the stump. "Wife too," he added, voice thin. "Both of 'em." She stepped back into the shadows, gave him space. Next morning Tommy called him Mr. Not sir, not hey, just Mr. Like maybe he was someone solid now. And the man, he didn't flinch at it. He just poured the boy another cup of coffee, watered down and sugared up and said, "Ain't no call to grow up too fast. But I reckon you will anyway." Eliza watched from the hearth, arms folded, as if trying to decide what part of this was mercy and what part was mistake. The snow hadn't stopped, but it didn't howl like it used to. Somewhere in the silence between them all, something old was shifting, not healing, not yet, but beginning to breathe. The storm let go sometime in the night. Come morning, the light fell different, clearer, not so blue. smoke rose straight from the chimney instead of curling sideways like it had been chased. Snow still lay thick over the world, but quiet now, settled, as if the mountain had breathed out. The man stood on the porch, coffee in one hand, blanket over his shoulders, eyes scanning the tree line like it owed him something. For days he'd watched the storm eat the woods. Now he watched it give them back. Behind him, the cabin had changed. Not much, but enough. Boots stood drying near the fire, smaller ones beside them. 2 wooden mugs on the table. Clara's drawing now tacked beside the mantel clock. Tommy's whittled stick soldier lay forgotten on the hearth. It was still his home, but the quiet had been changed. Thinned, maybe. Warmer, maybe. Or just cracked. He came back inside. Eliza stood near the stove, her braid falling down her back, sleeves rolled. She didn't belong to the room, not exactly, but she'd stopped fighting it. "We'll go," she said, not looking up. He didn't answer, set his cup down. "It's clear enough now. We'll take the trail down past Rock Ridge, get to town by tomorrow if the pass holds." She didn't say thank you, didn't say we'll remember what you done. She just spoke like it was time. Because it was. The man reached for his coat, hung it on a peg, sat down instead. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "We can't stay where we ain't welcome." He looked around. The room held the weight of her words, but none of the heat. "You weren't unwelcome," he said, slow. "You were cold, wet. Had 2 young'uns that needed keepin'. That was all." She turned to face him then, arms crossed. Not angry, just braced. "We didn't ask for kindness," she said. "No," he agreed. "And I didn't offer it. I offered shelter." She glanced toward the children, still sleeping, tangled in quilts and each other. "Maybe the silence was too quiet," she said after a while, voice softer. He met her eyes then, not blinking. "I ain't asking you to stay," he said. "I ain't that foolish." She waited. "But I'll offer something," he went on. "A deal." That caught her. She raised her chin a little. "What kind of deal?" "You stay. For the season. Until spring, at least. And then? We see what the road looks like." Her jaw tightened. "Why?" He stood, slow, not as tall as he used to be, but steady. "Not love. Don't mistake it," he said. "Just land that don't argue. Fire that don't freeze out. A roof and hands to split the work." She looked away. Swallowed. "Survival, then?" He nodded. "That's what it's always been." Eliza didn't answer. Later that night he stood outside their door, not knocking, just standing, listening to the hush of them breathing inside, children rustling in dreams, a woman lying still, eyes lightly open. He turned back toward the fire. There weren't no promises made, no papers signed, just the sound of boots not leaving. In the west, that's close enough to a yes. The town lay stretched under a thin veil of dust and sun, quiet in the way a place is when it's watching you come. One long main street, sagging boardwalks, horses tied loose in front of saloons and mercantiles, and eyes, always eyes, from shaded porches and curtained windows. They rode in slow, the man up front, Eliza just behind with Clara and Tommy sharing a saddle between them. The children's eyes flicked everywhere, signs, wagons, dogs sleeping in the shade. The boy clutched a little whittled soldier in his hand like it meant something. The townsfolk didn't speak, they didn't have to, just nods, tight and wary. A man with a face like unbaked bread leaned against the post office wall, thumbs hooked in his suspenders. A woman in black watched from the milliner's window, lips pursed like she'd tasted something gone bad. They stopped outside the general store. The bell above the door rang sharp when Eliza stepped inside. Clara trailed her, head up, trying to look brave. Tommy stayed behind, squatting near the trough, splashing his fingers in the water. The man stayed near his horse, adjusting nothing, just standing. The pastor came out first, long coat, soft eyes, beard going silver. The townsfolk didn't speak. They didn't have to. Just nods, tight and wary. A man with a face like unbaked bread leaned against the post office wall, thumbs hooked in his suspenders. A woman in black watched from the milliner's window, lips pursed like she'd tasted something gone bad. They stopped outside the general store. The bell above the door rang sharp when Eliza stepped inside. Clara trailed her, head up, trying to look brave. Tommy stayed behind, squatting near the trough, splashing his fingers in the water. The man stayed near his horse, adjusting nothing, just standing. The pastor came out first. Long coat, soft eyes, beard going silver. He approached with measured steps, hat in hand. "Didn't expect to see you again," he said. The man nodded, once. "Wasn't planning to come." Pastor gave a long look toward the store. "She yours?" He didn't answer. "Folks'll talk. They already are." The pastor sighed. "You need anything? I'll let you know." A younger man approached next, wiry, with a badge on his chest that caught the sun too quick. "Lawman." The man's eyes narrowed just a touch. "New faces," the deputy said. "Don't recall them riding in with you." They didn't. "Woman says her name's Eliza May. Been asked to keep an ear out for that one." The man didn't blink. "She's here now. That's all that matters. Not how the law sees it. The law don't live up in my hills." The deputy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Inside the store, Clara found the candy jars. Asked Eliza if they could have a piece. Eliza hesitated, then nodded once. The shopkeep watched every movement like something might be stolen, like kindness was a trick. Outside, the man stared down the street where memories used to walk. His brother's forge, the saloon he drank in too many nights, the graveyard just over the rise. "She's not yours," someone said behind him. The voice was familiar, rough, worn like old leather. He turned to see his brother, face older than it ought to be, apron streaked with soot. "You don't know what she's running from," his brother said. "And you do. I know enough. Word rides faster than any of us. You take in strays, you end up picking their fights." He looked toward the store again. Clara stood in the window, pressing her hand to the glass, smiling. "I ain't picking a fight," the man said. His brother shook his head, looked down. "You never did know how to let ghosts stay dead." The ride back up the mountain was quiet. Tommy had candy in both hands. Clara talked about school, asked if there was one nearby, or if she could learn at home. Eliza didn't speak. She held the reins tighter than needed, jaw set. When they reached the cabin, she dismounted slow, her dress catching on the stirrup. She stared at the door, then at the ridge behind them. "You still sure?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "No," she said. "But I don't see much else to be." He nodded. The town had seen them, judged them, whispered and weighed. And still they'd come back. In the West, that's how lines get drawn, with dust and the boots that keep walking through it. The fire had burned low by the time he spoke. Wind pressed gentle against the logs outside, just enough to rattle the window glass. It wasn't cold, not anymore, just still, like the night was holding its breath for something that might not come. Eliza sat near the hearth, mending one of Clara's stockings by firelight, the thread pulling through with a slow rhythm. The man sat across from her, elbows on knees, cup untouched in his hands. His shirt was worn at the collar, boots unlaced but still on. Neither of them had said much since supper. The children had gone to sleep early. Long ride the day before, nerves worn thin from town. Tommy curled in the bed lit. Kia pup. Clara's braid splayed across the pillow beside him. Safe, at least for now. "You gonna keep running?" he asked, not lifting his eyes. She didn't answer right away. Tied the stitch, cut the thread with her teeth. "You saw how they looked at us," she said finally. "I've seen worse. That deputy knew my name. I figured he would." She laid the stocking in her lap. Her fingers fidgeted a moment, then went still. "I didn't kill him," she said, voice quiet. "Not how they said." He nodded once, like it wasn't a surprise. "I figured that too." She blinked. The fire cracked. "You don't even know what happened." "Don't need to," he said. "Saw the look in your eye when you pulled those kids through my door. That wasn't a woman running from justice. That was a mother trying to stay upright." Eliza looked at him now, proper. No softness in it, just a tired honesty. She waited. He shifted in his chair, set the cup down without drinking. "I ain't got much," he said. "Land's rough, but it gives enough. Cabin stands. Mule's lame, but she works slow if I do. And the quiet? Well, the quiet don't bite as hard as it used to." She tilted her head just a little. "What are you saying?" He rubbed his jaw, cleared his throat. "I'm saying, stay. Not just through the winter, not just for the kids. Stay here, with me." Her breath caught, just barely. He saw it. "I ain't asking for nothing more than what you're already doing. Not saying we pretend to be what we ain't. Just two folk trying to keep their heads above the same water." She stood, stocking still in her hand. Walked to the table, set it down. She didn't speak. Didn't cry. Just looked at the walls, the stove, the boots near the door, her children's coats hanging on the hook beside his. "I've been someone's wife," she said. "Didn't end well." "I ain't asking you to be anyone's anything," he said. "Just stay." She moved to the window, pulled back the curtain. Snow had started again, just a dusting this time, nothing that would keep. "I don't know if I can trust peace," she said. "Me neither." He stood, but didn't come close, just waited. She turned around, eyes sharp, chin set like always, but there was something looser in her shoulders now. "I don't say yes," she said. He nodded. "But I don't say no neither." That was all. No hand held, no kiss, just the sound of her bare feet crossing the floor as she walked back toward the children's bed. And the man, left alone with a fire burning low, finally reached for his cup. Spring came hard that year, slow and stubborn like a mule that didn't trust the path. Snow turned to mud, mud to grass, and the cabin, once swallowed by white, stood clear under a wide blue sky. The land woke careful. So did they. Clara rode the old roan mare with a rope grip and her chin high, boots too big but balanced like she was born to saddle. She whooped sometimes when the wind got under her hat, and the mare, lazy for anyone else, answered like it meant something. Tommy took to tools. Not big ones, just a hammer, nails, bits of twine. He fixed what he could reach, copied what he saw. Once, he patched the chicken coop with a tin lid and half a prayer, held through a full thunderstorm. The man taught what he knew, quietly, without calling it teaching. How to mend fence, turn a seed bed, read a cow's eye before it kicked. They listened more than most grown men he'd known. Eliza stood back sometimes, arms crossed, watching like she was memorizing it all. She worked too, harder than most men would let a woman. Hauled water, chopped wood, stitched what tore, and she never once asked for thanks. She never once acted like she didn't have a choice in it. Nights were simple, candlelight, bread that rose just right. Tommy falling asleep in front of the hearth. Clara sprawled on the braided rug, book open, eyes half shut. Once, the man woke in the dark and saw Eliza kneeling by the stove, tucking a blanket tighter Rue, and Tommy's shoulders. She didn't know he saw. He said nothing. Time didn't make promises, but it moved, and they moved with it. One season folded into another. Fence posts aged, and the roan mare grew grey around the eyes. The kids outgrew everything but the mountains. He built a shed behind the barn, took 3 days and tore up his hands, but he carved a name into the beam above the door. Maystead. Said it was just a name for the property. but the way Clara smiled, you'd think he'd built them a palace. A man from town came up one autumn, a photographer with a tripod and glass plates. Eliza Near said no, but Clara begged, and Tommy promised to smile. They all stood out front of the cabin, Eliza's hand light on the man's shoulder, Clara holding the reins of her horse, Tommy with a straw hat too big for his head. The man didn't smile, not quite, but his eyes softened. Later that night, when the wind picked up and the fire crackled just right, Eliza touched his arm at the table. Just a brush, brief, sure, and real. He didn't speak, just turned his hand up to meet hers for a second. Then she pulled away, stood to wash the dishes. It wasn't love like the novels said. No swooning, no vows. But it was steady. It was enough. And in the stillness of the mountain, in the breath between chopping wood and teaching a boy how to hold a bridle, that was more than he ever figured he'd find again. The wind came down off the ridge just before dusk, same as it always had. Dry this time, not bitter. It moved slow through the grass, nudged the porch swing, rattled a shutter loose that no one ever got round to fixing. The land hadn't changed much. Fences sagged where they leaned, trees grew a little thicker along the creek bed, but the bones of it, ridge, timberline, cabin, stood just the same. Some things stayed because they didn't know how to quit. Inside, the table was set for 4. 2 places full, one half cleared, and one at the end where no one sat anymore. Tommy was taller now, voice near as deep as the man's used to be. Clara had a mother's set to her jaw, but she'd learned the quiet from him, didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Eliza stood by the stove, ladling soup, the sleeves of her blouse rolled neat to the elbow. She moved careful, not slow, just with the grace of someone who knew what mattered and what didn't. A photograph hung on the wall above the hearth, the same one from years before, faces still young, a home still new. Out back, under the cottonwood, the wood marker had weathered down, the carving softened by rain and time. Maystead. Another sat beside it now, fresh, straight, no name carved yet. Snow began to fall again. Not heavy, just a dusting, same as that first day. It landed on the roof, the steps, the backs of the horses in the paddock. The world didn't stop for it, just carried on, softer. And if the wind sounded like a voice just for a moment, maybe that was the kind of thing only a mountain heard. He thought he was rescuing them from the storm. But it turned out they'd rescued him. Inside, laughter stirred at the table. A boy, a girl, a woman who stayed. The fire snapped, steady and warm, and the snow kept falling. This time it was just weather,